Good evening,
And you're
everyone.
good to go.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our City Council public hearing tonight. We start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and tonight I will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Griffin,
Here.
Councilmember Dewey,
Here.
Councilmember Zimmer,
Here.
Councilmember Ward,
Here.
Councilmember Wirtz,
Here.
Councilmember Gibbons,
Here.
Councilmember Sears.
Councilmember
You're
Sears.
muted, Bob.
Bob,
Well, I'm here.
okay, all right, thank you. Mr. Hessel's having electronic difficulties, so he'll join us later. Normally, at this point, he would announce sunshine laws involving the city council meeting remotely, but he will join us when he can. Before we start the public hearing this evening, I want to disclose that my stepson is an employee of Altus Properties. He is a financial analyst and is not involved in this project, and his compensation is not in any way tied to this project. I reviewed the ethical rules and spoke with the city attorney. I've been assured that my stepson's position does not create a conflict of interest for me. Thus, I will fulfill my duties and participate in the public hearing and in any future deliberations and votes on this matter, and ask that the city clerk record this disclosure in the minutes. Mr. Hess, I see you've joined us.
I apologize for my internet connection that I lost.
City Attorney John Hessel is now with us. Will you announce our sunshine law with the City Council meeting?
I will, Mayor. Section 610.015 of the Missouri Sunshine Law provides that members of the City Council who are not physically present in the council chambers can participate and vote on all matters when an emergency exists in the nature of the emergency stated in the minutes. So I'd ask the minutes to reflect that unfortunately we're still within this pandemic of COVID-19, and the City Council is elected to participate in this meeting remotely for the safety of each other as well as the safety of the public. Again, I'd just like that to be noted in the minutes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. So we'll now move forward with the public hearing, which is a request for a mixed-use development in the B2 zoning district known as the James, formerly Kirkwood Flats, at 426 North Kirkwood Road. Mr. Pressel, do you wish to enter any exhibits into the record?
I would, Mayor. I'd offer as Exhibit 1 the affidavit of publication indicating that the notice of this public hearing appeared in the legal ledger. Exhibit 2 is an affidavit of publication verifying the notice of public hearing appeared in St. Louis County. Exhibit 3 is an affidavit of publication indicating the notice of public hearing also appeared in the Webster Kirkwood Times. Exhibit 4 is the viewer map showing the property that is the subject of the public hearing, as well as those properties who received written notice of the public hearing. Exhibit 5 is a list of property owners to whom notice of this hearing has been sent. Exhibit 6 is the report of the Planning and Zoning Commission dated July 15, 2020, which by a vote of 4-2, the commission failed to recommend approval of a request for a mixed-use development plan in the B2 zoning district known as the James, formerly Kirkwood Flats. Exhibit 7 is the subcommittee report of the Planning and Zoning Commission dated July 14, 2020. Exhibit 8 is the Code of Ordinances of the City of Kirkwood. I would also offer as Exhibit 9 a group exhibit, which the city clerk informs me consists of 67 emails that have been directed to the City Council, 2 petitions in opposition to the application, one received on October 15, 2020 with 14 signatures, and a second petition received on October 20, 2020, which the electronic version contained 890 signatures, and the other version, the paper version, contained 21 signatures. And I would refer to that as a group exhibit 9.
John, if I may, I think you announced, and I know it's part of the record, that planning and zoning was 4-2. It was 4-4, correct?
I'm sorry if I said 4-2. I spoke incorrectly. It was 4-4.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Hawes, who will present this matter to the City Council?
That'd be Jonathan Raich, Director of Planning and Development Services for the city.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Jonathan, before, can I stop you for 1 sec before we get started? As I like to do before public hearings, I just want to make a few comments about public hearing and what it is and the process. It is a legally required public hearing. There is no vote to be taken tonight by the City Council. That vote will take place when we have it for first reading, most likely on November, not first reading, resolution on our agenda for November 5th. Tonight is an opportunity for the council to get information. There will not be shows of support or opposition. Some council members may ask a lot of questions, some may ask no questions. Please don't assume that by the number of questions or lack of questions or type of questions that any particular council member is opposed or in favor of the project. That will all be brought out and discussed when the resolution is brought to the table. A couple quick things for everyone. It's always good to have a productive public hearing. And for that, for the council, presenters, and residents, I ask everyone to be concise and brief. Make your points, but please be concise and brief. Please don't repeat what others have said if possible. Just feel free to say I agree or disagree, but as we all know, in meetings, longer meetings go on, the more I think people's attention is diverted. We want everyone to get an opportunity, but please be concise and brief. Jonathan, there you go.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. You all can see my presentation, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Let me see if I can get the slide to advance now. There we go. Thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to present this information to you tonight. My role as the Planning Development Services Director is to provide the council with information, the facts of the proposal at hand received from the applicant, as well as provide information that relates to staff's review of the matter and the process that this project has gone through with the public meetings and Planning and Zoning Commission's review to this date. So as mentioned, this is the public hearing for the request, and this request is for a mixed-use site plan in the B2 district, and it is allowed by our code in this district. And I apologize, give me 1 second. I have a child who is in the room, Marquetta. I apologize.
Oh, it's all right.
Under Zoom.
She's always welcome.
All right, I apologize for that. I'm sorry. All right, so this is a site plan review request. So this procedure in our code for mixed use, it is actually a two-stage process, and this is for the preliminary development plan in the B2 district. If this project were to get approval, there would still be a final site plan review that would go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. So I don't want that to confuse anybody, but it would come through just with additional detail. But all the broader concept and plan, building placement, site circulation, all that is included in this proposal. So the subject site we have is approximately 2.6 acres. It's located near the northwest corner of Kirkwood Road and East Washington. It's the site's currently occupied by UMB Bank. It is zoned B2, so this request is not for rezoning. It does not include a text amendment, does not include a special use permit. It is purely for the preliminary development plan in a B2 district. Here are some site photos of the subject site as well as the surrounding area. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. So the subject property, the UMB Bank, is in the upper left. Another view of the property with the adjacent gas station in the upper right, and then looking to the north and across the street, across Kirkwood Road there on the bottom photos. So again, I just want to, although the city council is reviewing and considering the current application and current proposal, I do think it is still important to just let the public and the council know what has happened to date briefly. And so the application was originally submitted in September of 2019. It was introduced in November, in early November, at the Planning and Zoning Commission. As per their normal process, a subcommittee was assigned, and we had our first on-site meeting on November 14th. Between that initial subcommittee meeting and February, really, it was the applicant, based on the feedback received at the introduction meeting and the on-site meeting, and we do allow public comment via email and at the meetings. So that all the feedback that was received, the applicant did revise the plans on submit revised plans on January 29th. Provide additional exhibits requested by the subcommittee on February 12th as it pertains to the building height. And then on February 18th, I'm sorry, there was an additional subcommittee meeting held at City Hall in February. And then it was ultimately, there was a delay because of the COVID pandemic in March, and it was slated to be voted on during that time period. And it was delayed because of that until July 14th, which was the first meeting we held on Zoom for the Planning and Zoning Commission. As it was mentioned, the subcommittee presented their recommendation, and ultimately the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 4-4 on the matter. After that time, the regular timing for a public hearing would have been typically in August, but in between July 14th and August, the applicant did request, again, because of the feedback and received, the applicant requested some additional time to re-examine their submission. And really the function of the council schedule and then the applicant's request is what put us to the October 22nd public hearing date that we're at tonight. With all that said, this is, as I mentioned, is a site plan review, specifically a mixed use preliminary development plan in the B2 district. But the pertinent considerations for the city council are, does the proposed site plan meet the various site development standards stated in our zoning code, as well as the 15 criteria listed in section A 220.7. However, as you see in red there, and I want to make it clear for the record that our code, when we evaluate for our various development regulations and standards, our code very clearly and very specifically has a section A 220.2 that allows the city council to consider projects that don't meet all of the criteria 100%. So that's what we refer to as a site plan modification process. The applicant is entitled to request modifications as long as and provide justification for said modifications. So this process is working within our code. It does not violate or contradict our code. It allows a path for the city council to consider on a case-by-case basis proposed developments and whether the overall development is something that they see as beneficial for the community, even if it means modifying certain requirements. I'll also point out that the provisions were written to the code at the city council's request, and it specifically states that these decisions are at the sole discretion of the city council, whether or not modifications would be granted. So as I mentioned, there were a few different revisions, and again, after this slide, I will be only presenting information on the current proposal. But I just to give some background for the city council and the public's benefit. The original plan, it's always been mixed use. It's always contained 12,500 square feet of residential on the first floor. In the original plan, it was a 6-story building at 76.5 feet tall with 178 units with 297 parking stalls. The revision in January reduced the height of the building to 5 floors and 60 feet, and also reduced the number to 174 units. The number of units was a smaller reduction than you would think when an entire story or floor is removed. So what they did, they expanded the footprint of the building at that time to respond to concern about the building height and still allow them to capture the unit count that they desire and they claim that they need for their development. The parking stall count has been substantially same throughout this all. And the proposal that's before the council tonight is, again, the same amount of commercial space on the first floor along Kirkwood Road. However, the residential count has been reduced from 174, which is what the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed and voted on, the proposal with 174 units. And that has been reduced to 152 units, still keeping the parking count the same. So I'll go through this a little bit, but obviously the parking ratios are higher that they're providing now because the parking count is the same, but the number of units is lower. Let's see. This is just an excerpt from the current proposed site plan, and it is, I'll try to point out a few things. I'm actually going to go through as I describe these. This is the civil site plan, and it shows the parking layout. So what you see is the commercial space along Kirkwood Road, the proposed plaza, and I'm rushing over these a little bit because I'll show the plan in color on the next slide, and it'll be easier to discuss some of these things. But you have the 12,500 square foot of proposed commercial space along frontage with a proposed public plaza. This is the ground level of the structured parking. There is a lower level as well that would be accessed through the northern, that's the eastern side of the building. And then the darker gray area is the building footprint. So the gray area goes out, about halfway to Washington Avenue. And that is the part of the building that was truncated or set back further from Washington Avenue in this latest revision. So this wing used to extend when it was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. This wing extended further out towards Washington, and that is where they were able to reduce the unit count. So let me go to, well, before I leave this slide, you'll see a couple items that we'll discuss too are the proposed access points. So there is one access point proposed on Kirkwood Road. However, it is proposed and recommended to be so by staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the traffic study provided as a right-in, right-out only restricted access. And the one access point on Washington Avenue, after consideration and discussion with the Planning and Zoning Commission, was originally full access, but it was determined based on concern from the adjacent neighbors about potential trips that would be generated into the neighborhood. The applicant agreed to construct it in a way that it would prohibit left turns out of the development. So it would allow right turns in, right turns, left turns in, and right turns out. It would only prohibit the left out movement, which would go eastbound on Washington Avenue. So here is the color site plan that is a little easier to see the building form and all what I've been discussing. So again, this building that's proposed is a 5-story building, and you'll see that in some of the elevations provided, which was revised from the original 6 stories. It meets the building height requirement of 60 feet, which is the maximum that can be considered in the mixed use, B2 mixed use. Our building height is measured from the average grade, and you'll see that in their elevations, the average grade at the adjacent to the building. But that is how our code defines building height, and that it does meet our maximum building height in the B2 district. There is on the first floor, as I mentioned, there's commercial space in the active frontage along Kirkwood Road with structured parking behind and an additional lower level of parking. There are, I think my next diagram, well, on this one, you still see the other elements that they've added, and I'll let them elaborate on these on the public benefit. But I mentioned this item you see is keyed as number 1 here is the proposed public plaza that they have proposed and agreed to a public use easement, both for this area as well as the pedestrian pathway along the northern property line that would go through the site. They have agreed to providing public access easements across both of those features. Additionally, they agreed to, at staff's recommendation, to provide a pedestrian hybrid beacon across Kirkwood Road. And these are all things, this is shown on the plan as a general placement just to indicate that they have agreed to that and will provide it. However, the exact placement, the exact design would all be vetted and happen through the final site plan process. But so this is one of the measures that they'll talk about going above and beyond is this pedestrian hybrid beacon crossing across Kirkwood Road, as well. And they have a slide, I think, that shows it, but some pedestrian traffic calming features at the intersection of Taylor and Washington Avenue. This diagram shows the site circulation and parking proposed just in a different way. I mentioned the access points, one access, restricted access right in, right out on Kirkwood, left out, prohibited from Washington Avenue or onto Washington Avenue. But this was just to show kind of how the parking is provided mainly. You know, as I mentioned, there's 2 levels of structured parking, and those equate to 217 of the 295 parking spaces. The remainder of the 78 parking spaces, I believe, are all surface parking. Some of these here, if you noticed on the other diagrams, they're partially tucked under. Some of these are tucked under the building, that wing of the building. So that is the parking provided. While I'm on parking, it is, I'll note that the when they reduced the number of units, they were able to pick up some extra parking that does allow them actually to accommodate a restaurant without any modification needed for parking. So the latest count with a 5,000 square foot restaurant, I believe they would be required 292 parking spaces, and they're providing 295. So there are a number of things that would get vetted through. Right now, there's not any approval included for a restaurant, but they really wanted to reserve that ability to plan for that in the future. Without the restaurant, I apologize, I thought I had that. I forgot that number off the top of my head, but the 254 without the restaurant would be required. So they exceed those requirements in either scenario. This slide is the proposed landscape plan. Our preliminary development plan process does not require specific species, so that's not the level of detail provided in this plan. But what it does show are that the trees that are being proposed in their locations. So they would be required 9 trees along Kirkwood Road, and only 7 are provided. And there are a number of understory trees in the plaza in the adjacent area, but we have not, those don't classify as the required canopy trees along our streets. So technically by our code, they require 9 canopy trees, they're providing 7. There are 5 canopy trees provided along Washington Avenue. Those are all the required and provided. They have side yard landscaping along the eastern property line. This is, you'll see it a couple times, but basically the current extent of the proposed drive does not provide for adequate space for the planting there. We have overlapping requirements of our code for parking lot perimeter and side yard, but essentially what that equates to when we take the most restrictive or the most requirement of those 2 is that it would require 15 trees. These 2 trees that you see are also required at the end of parking rows, so technically they would be required 15 trees in this length, and they do not propose any at this point. And I'll go over a possible change to that later as well. Aside from those, the trees along the northern property line, the trees along in the plaza, and the trees along the adjacent property are all above and beyond what our code requires. All right, so these are the building elevations. As I mentioned when we were discussing height, this gives you an idea. And I do want to stress, as I have in the past, that the purpose for showing these and for the applicant providing these is really for mass and scale only. This is not, the city council, as you all know, does not approve, review architectural details. So that is a separate function of our designated architectural review board. So, you know, the materials are shown here, and they have shown some detail, balconies, what have you. However, all of that will be vetted through the architectural review board process if the project proceeds. So you get an idea from these elevations. They provided that red line along the bottom is the average grade along the bottom at where the building meets the ground there. And so measured from that average grade line is what they kept their building, the top of their flat roof, under the 60 feet, coming in right under that 60 feet height restriction. From these elevations, you can get a better idea. So the top elevation shows is the western elevation. So you have the commercial storefronts in the foreground with the plaza on the left side of that elevation. And then in the background, you see the building wing that would extend towards Washington Avenue. The bottom elevation is the eastern elevation. So the opposite side of the building, that's what would be visible from the east, and the access drive that goes along behind the building, and where it accesses the lower level of parking you see there on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Elevations of the other two, the northern elevation and southern elevation. In both of these, you can see a little bit of the tuck under parking. Let's see, north elevation. I'm sorry. So the structured parking would be here. This is the commercial space. On the southern elevation, you can see the tuck under parking that I was mentioned along that wing that extends out to Washington Avenue. You know, I failed to mention, they'll go over it a little bit, but the building is in a kind of some form of a U shape with an amenity deck provided on the second floor for the residents of the building. That's what you see here from the south. So it would open up to the south with a court amenity deck there. All right. As I mentioned, we have the modification process, and the applicant will go into detail in their presentation about their justifications. And as I mentioned earlier, the final determination, if the proposal warrants modifications, is at the sole discretion of the city council. I do want to point out, these are the modifications, the 4 modifications that their current proposal would require. So the current code density requirement for square foot of lot area per unit is 1,200 in our code. Their proposal at 152 units would provide 734 square feet of lot area per unit for a difference of 465 square feet. There's a street occupation requirement, and I apologize, I didn't point that out on the diagram, but hopefully you all recall that from previous discussions. But it is a newer requirement that requires so much of the building occupy a certain percentage of the street frontage. So in this particular location, the building is supposed to occupy 75% of the street frontage within our maximum building setback range, really to bring the building forward to activate the pedestrian experience. Really, because of their proposed public plaza, they are not meeting that. The requirement is 75%. They're at 54% because that plaza sets part of the building back. If the plaza were considered, they would exceed the requirement. But the difference there is 21%. I mentioned the eastern side, the eastern property line landscaping required 15 trees, 0 provided for a difference of 15. And then I also mentioned, when we're looking at landscaping, the frontage trees along Kirkwood Road with 9 canopy trees required, 7 canopy trees provided. And I'm sure they'll mention for a difference of 2, and they'll mention the other trees as well that they are providing. And so I'll mention at this point too, you'll see that height is not up there. I've mentioned they do meet the height. I know there's a number of comments and questions that have arisen throughout this process about height and density, and it's easy to confuse those two topics, but they're obviously not the same requirement of the code, and the maximum height requirement is met with this. I'll also note that to attempt to vet through negative effects of the proposal, all proposals are reviewed by our various city departments and city utilities. A traffic study was required, and I'll go over some detail of that, and reviewed by our professional staff. While no one would argue that the traffic will not increase, no issues have been identified related to traffic congestion, traffic safety, or utility provisions at this time. Pertaining specifically to the question of density, as you see it on the screen, because they are requesting a modification to that, I would recommend that the city council ask themselves what specific negative effects they think will come from approving the proposed 152 units, and that you don't confuse this topic with things like height or traffic, unless there are other data available that has not been presented to date. So if the answers are related to height or the size of the building, these are not directly correlated to the density request, and these are important distinctions for the council to consider. So as I mentioned, there was a traffic study provided by an independent traffic consulting firm. It was conducted with and revised with the reduced unit concept of 152 units. It found that the total anticipated morning peak hour trips generated would be 80 additional trips over the entire peak hour, so a little over 1 per minute, and that the total evening PM peak hour trips generated, again, this is peak hour, the busiest hour for the development, would be an additional 105 on the entire street network, so under two vehicles per minute that would be generated on average at the peak hour. It also found that although there is an increase in the trips generated, the study concluded there would be minimal impact on the operating conditions at the adjacent intersections and would not warrant any roadway improvements to accomplish the proposed development. It did also recommend the right-in, right-out restriction that I discussed on Kirkwood Road, and acknowledge the recommendation for a prohibited left turn out onto Washington Avenue. At the Planning and Zoning Commission, again, just for the record, there was quite a bit of discussion about traffic concerns on Washington with potential effects on the adjacent neighborhood, and it led to that condition that I mentioned to prohibit left-out movement. The applicant also is proposing traffic calming features and curb extensions at the Taylor-Washington intersection in an effort to address any or to make that intersection safer. The building height was also discussed at length with additional exhibits, and you should all have received copies of those exhibits. The renderings provided that would show different vantage points from Taylor Avenue and how it would look and how it compares to adjacent buildings. And the building height was lowered throughout this process. As I mentioned, the applicant did explain their modification justifications, and they'll do that again tonight. Another thing, there is a cross access point at the northeastern corner. We just to call out, staff is recommending that be for emergency access only, just so that nobody would use that to bypass the access restrictions at the other access points to go through another development just to get around those. So. The subcommittee, as I mentioned, did provide a recommendation to the commission. It did receive a split vote of 4-4. The subcommittee, however, did recommend approval of the modifications. There are conditions that you can see in the report that was drafted that would require the public use easement for the plaza as well as for the northern pedestrian walkway. I mentioned the mid-block crossing across Kirkwood Road, curb extensions at Taylor and Washington, the limited access points. This is one I'll call out. At that time, the parking rate, there was kind of a compromise discussed about converting between 4 and 8 parking stalls along that eastern property line to landscape islands to provide for some of the trees that would be required, not all, but provide some of them. However, I do want to point out that the margin, the extra parking now with their consideration and discussion of reserving the ability to have a restaurant there, the ability is more, the excess of parking is more around roughly three spaces. So just keep that in mind if you're going to consider discussing that point. And I should note there is, during construction, our code does allow for the request for preliminary or temporary buildings during construction to be proposed, and they are proposing, because of the scale of the project, they are proposing an off-site temporary bank location so that UMB could continue to operate during construction at 136 West Washington. They provided a general sketch for that with the documents. However, that would be also something that would be further vetted through the final site plan process if this project moves forward. So, as I mentioned, this process has come through the Planning and Zoning Commission. Regardless of the Planning and Zoning Commission is purely a recommending body to the City Council. So regardless of their vote, it is the city's process to provide the applicant due process with their request, due consideration to bring the matter to the City Council. So that is where we are tonight. We present the information. We're at the public hearing. The applicant does have representatives here and has a presentation, and we'll, after that, as you all know, we'll hear the public comments. As the mayor mentioned, after that, it would go for consideration for a vote, and then if it is approved, then it would enter the final site plan process, and the applicant would have to go through that application. So with that is the end of my presentation. I am available for questions if you have.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think what we'll do at this point is the petitioner has a presentation. Why don't we have the petitioner come on, and then we'll hold the questions for you and the petitioner to the from council to the end of that. As the petitioner comes on, I will, not to put pressure on you, I will ask you to be concise as you can. Try not to repeat factual things that Jonathan gave us, and we'll open to if council has questions on specific things, obviously council will ask. So who will make the presentation from our applicant?
Josh Udelhoffen with Altus Properties. I'm the Managing Director of Development. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Jonathan. As always, that's a terrific introduction, and I will endeavor not to repeat many of the points that you so skillfully detailed for us. Mr. Mayor and the City Council, thank you very much for your time this evening. I recognize that our project has been a hot topic in and around the Kirkwood area for some time now. We are excited to have this opportunity to present our proposal to you this evening, as we feel it does do a lot of positive things for the city of Kirkwood, despite some of the negative perspectives that have been voiced in and around the community. I'll get right into it with that. Real quickly, just a quick overview on Altus Properties for those of you who don't know us. We are a St. Louis-based company with around 50 employees. Our headquarters is located here in St. Louis. And while we don't spend a lot of time or money advertising, we're actually a nice sized firm. We currently own about $600 million of assets in our core markets. Most of them are widely considered Class A real estate. And we own and operate all of them ourselves, which I think is a differentiator for many developments that do occur. I'd also like to mention just not only are we based in St. Louis, but we are big believers in the value proposition that Kirkwood offers. We're here tonight because we believe in this community. We're here tonight because we want to invest our time and effort into this community. While not shown on the current screen in front of you, I would like to mention that we have 3 key members of our in-house team that do reside in the Kirkwood community. Our Director of Design and Construction, Mark Venturella, who would actually lead our efforts here, is a resident of Kirkwood, actually a recently moved resident of Kirkwood. And both of the members of who lead our leasing efforts on the commercial side of our platform are also Kirkwood residents. So we look forward to potentially doing business here with folks that live here. I'd also like to add that our entire project team from top to bottom are all companies that are based in St. Louis. Clearly of most importance on this screen for this evening's conversation is our architecture firm, HOK. HOK is internationally recognized as one of the top architecture firms. They've designed many of St. Louis's most notable projects. And while there might be some in the community that don't agree with our vision on the design side, I think we can all agree that HOK is the unquestionable expert in St. Louis, and again, widely recognized as top of the class. I'd also mention that our head of design, Jonathan Worth, is actually a Kirkwood resident as well, and has kids in the Kirkwood School District. While it's been discussed many, many times in many, many meetings, I do want to recap that these were the guiding documents that we utilized to put forth the plan that you're going to see here tonight. I'd like to commend Jonathan and the staff, as well as the City Council and Planning and Zoning Commissions for commissioning these studies. These can be controversial. However, I think perhaps one of the most important things that should be taken from these studies is that they're done by agnostic and independent consultants. They're not done on behalf of developers. They're not done on behalf of residents. They're done on behalf of experts with much more knowledge than I have on how a community can grow and benefit its population as a whole, not just a few that may be directly adjacent to a subject site such as ours this evening. I won't belabor the point on some of the findings of those master plans and studies. However, we believe strongly that the proposal that we're putting in front of this council this evening aligns in many, many ways with the goals that were clearly outlined in these studies. And I think you'll see as we go through our presentation this evening that the opportunity is distinct with this development. And I think you'll see as we go into some imagery that we've prepared that these are the right sites for the city of Kirkwood to extend and expand what is a very successful downtown district that really falls apart currently once you get north of Adams. jumping right into it. Clearly, here's an aerial looking to the southeast from the northwest. The subject site is in the middle of the image. I think perhaps what we can all take from this image is that once you get north of Adams and Kirkwood, there is a materially different built environment than what exists to the south of it. It becomes a very auto-centric environment with large surface parking lots, gas stations, I think 5 banks at last count, but perhaps I'm off by one either way. But this does not further what makes Kirkwood great. What makes Kirkwood great exists south of these sites. Dialing in a bit is the, I believe, 20,000+ square foot UMB Bank building. We all widely recognize, obviously, that banking has changed substantially over the past couple of decades. We do have some representatives this evening from UMB Bank that will speak with more specifics. However, as you might imagine, this bank has become, or this building rather, has become substantially functionally obsolescent as it relates to the modern banking world. Lastly, I just wanted to provide a picture of the building from the pedestrian level. Clearly, if you take this image and you counter it to the stated plans of the downtown master plan, it really does nothing in terms of furthering the goals that the Kirkwood has identified as their priority. Jumping into our proposed plan. I won't go into extensive detail here because Jonathan has already done a great job of really detailing much of our plan. However, I do think there's a couple items of note. As Jonathan mentioned, we've revised our plan twice. We have done that in an effort to satisfy the concerns of the community. I recognize that there are members of the community that are still not satisfied with our proposal. We may disagree on the justification with which they're not satisfied. However, I do respect their perspective. Again, we want to be in Kirkwood because it's a great community. However, there are certain realities of development, specifically development within the B2 zoning district and some of its requirements that have made this project look like what it looks like today. I think perhaps the most notable component of it is the first floor of this building is simply required to either be retail, commercial, or parking. It cannot be residential. That forces us to go vertical clearly. Once you go vertical, there are certain economies that must be overcome. The only way to do that is by creating revenue that can justify those upfront costs. We recognize that that is a reality that we have to deal with while at the same time endeavoring to satisfy the constituency of Kirkwood. In an effort to make this palatable for folks, we have done some things that we feel are above and beyond the requirements. One of them is obviously the Civic Plaza here, identified as number 1 on the key. We intend to dedicate that for a public space. We think this can make a great marker for the northern entrance to Kirkwood and really define that experience of going into downtown Kirkwood. I might also mention that we've restricted our access significantly. We've done that in an effort to satisfy the concerns of the community along Taylor, Bodley, and Washington about driving traffic into their residential areas. We have no desire to drive traffic into their areas. However, there is a grid system that exists within Kirkwood. We certainly can't stop any residents, patrons, or anyone else from driving along those areas. However, we've done our best to change in how that traffic movement exists. Dialing into the pedestrian experience of seeing our building as you come into Kirkwood. I won't go into great detail here because, as Jonathan mentioned, there's still, should we be successful at City Council with a positive vote, we would still need to go through the architectural review process, which we're prepared and excited to enter into if we're so fortunate. However, perhaps what none of these images properly convey is we are using materials that you see in and around Kirkwood. This is traditional hand-laid masonry. This is terracotta shingle. These are large windows. There's large glass to effectuate the desire of the retail environment that we're endeavoring to build. This is not anything that is in contrast to what you see in Kirkwood today. I might also point out some of the public areas that we've created here. This opportunity for a public plaza, we feel, creates a northern anchor point for the city of Kirkwood that can be something that is as special as the anchor point that exists across from City Hall at the Kirkwood Station project. In the foreground to the right is the crosswalk that we've offered to fund out of our project development. Clearly here is a representational location for that crosswalk. We are eager to work with city staff and engineering to find the appropriate location to create the safest possible pedestrian experience as it transitions into our project. And then clearly 12,000 square feet of what will be new Class A retail that will produce hopefully restaurants and other lifestyle amenities that will be a benefit to not only the residents of our proposed building, but Kirkwood at large. They'll be replacing as I mentioned, 25-ish thousand square foot bank that is really only utilized as a small fraction of that entire building. Turning around and looking at the building from the south, this is, again, the retail environment. This will create a walkable environment. As you're seeing, we will take the pedestrians off of the curb line. As anyone who's walked or ran or biked along this particular thoroughfare, they know that this current sidewalk is directly up against the current driving lanes, and it creates a very unsafe environment. We will be pulling that pedestrian way off of the street. We'll be creating green spaces to enhance its appeal and create desirability of walkability. You can also see in this image the amenities that Jonathan referenced in the center of the building that face south. This will become our primary entrance for the residents of the building and the leasing and office functionality of our staff. What you see here just to the right of the screen is our amenities. We are looking to create a product that does not currently exist in the city of Kirkwood. This will be a product that has a pool, a hot tub, a exterior area for residents to enjoy. On the inside, we will have a fully staffed operation, concierge services, a resident lounge, a fitness facility, a golf driving simulator, and other amenities that really allow Kirkwood to offer something that doesn't currently exist for young professionals, empty nesters, and other folks that may want to live in the city of Kirkwood, but don't currently have a product type that fits their desire. Diving back to the open space, I covered this a bit already, so I won't speak too much longer. We look forward to the opportunity to work with the city to create this space in a vision that not only furthers the desirability of our building, but furthers the desirability of Kirkwood. This can be a space programmed in many different ways. This can have a key mark that identifies that you've entered into Kirkwood. This can have an art installation. This could have a water feature and really be something that I think the community can be quite proud of. Lastly, on the images of the building, again, just reinforcing modern Class A retail will be a part of our project. Something that I think the northern end of Kirkwood could dramatically benefit from versus the environment of auto-centric gas stations and closed off environments that exist today. I was going to speak on this slide a bit about our access. I don't think I need to belabor this point. I thought Jonathan did a very nice job. The only thing I might add is along Kirkwood Road, there are currently three curb cuts that the UMB Bank operates. All three of those curb cuts allow vehicular traffic to move in any direction. This restriction to a single access point with a right in, right out only will substantially improve vehicular safety as well as pedestrian safety. Jonathan mentioned this as well, but I think it bears repeating. In an effort to justify our modification request, we have offered to fund substantial offsite improvements. The Hawk pedestrian beacon, again, it's illustrated here in a specific location. However, we recognize that will require substantial engagement with the city of Kirkwood and its engineers. We've also offered to pay for curb outs or curb extensions at North Taylor Avenue and Washington Avenue. For folks that are not familiar with what that is, essentially we take the curb and we extend it into what is traditionally the parallel parking area. and that prevents folks from passing on the right-hand side, which is typically the most frequent vehicular pedestrian striking incident area. So we do want to improve this. It is not only a benefit to the Kirkwood community, but quite frankly, a benefit to our proposed project, which we see as an extension of the Kirkwood community. Modification requests. Clearly, the topic du jour that the community is concerned about. Again, we are requesting 4 modifications. The minimum frontage, which Jonathan explained earlier, we are requesting a modification of the 75% requirement to 54. Again, this has to do with our public plaza that exists along Kirkwood Road. For your edification, in many communities, those public plazas or sometimes pocket parks are oftentimes counted as frontage. And if they were in this particular instance, we would exceed the 75% requirement. Side yard landscape requirement, Jonathan spoke to the nuance as it relates there. As a component of our subcommittee approval, there was a request that was a derivative of a request from Kirkwood Forestry. We look forward to incorporating those requests into our plan. We are willing to do that in any number of ways. I would mention, because Jonathan did not, there are Kirkwood Power and Electric power lines along our eastern boundary. So there will need to be some smart use of landscaping there to assure that we don't get growth into those power lines. There is another component of this project that's worth mentioning as well, the condominium project that exists directly to our east. In an effort to provide access to their tuck under parking, they actually created a substantial retaining wall that exists along our eastern boundary that does restrict tree growth clearly. So there are some extenuating factors there that should be considered. I don't think they're the council's concern. However, we are aware of them, and we would look forward to working with the Forestry Division as well as Kirkwood City staff. The front yard landscape requirement, again, we are requesting a change there from 9 right-of-way trees to 7. We are offering 8 additional understory trees as part of the public plaza, and as well as the removal of those 2 does create the opportunity for a landing spot for the pedestrian hawk beacon crosswalk that would exist along Kirkwood Road. Should the city not desire to install that crosswalk, we would be acceptable to increasing our tree requirement back to the required 9. Lastly, but certainly not least, is the density requirement. We are beyond the maximum. The current limit is 1,200 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. We are at 734. We have worked very hard to reduce this to the extent possible. There are certain realities that exist within a multifamily for rent building in terms of unit count. There are financial realities that, while not necessarily directly this council's concern, they will impact both my proposal and any other proposal that gets brought before you. If the city truly wants a denser mixed use for rent project, I think that they will have to consider that this particular limitation may be in direct contrast to what's possible within that environment. And I have a little more on that. And I think these next couple of slides are worthy of some consideration and some juxtaposition against the particular metrics. As Jonathan mentioned, there are 3 metrics that limit size within the B2 zoning district. One is building height. I don't think we need to belabor the point. We comply at 60 feet. One is gross lot area per dwelling unit. 1,200 is permitted. I believe planning and zoning has approved, and council perhaps is considering a reduction in this requirement down to 1,000. However, that's clearly still not in compliance with our 734 as proposed. Finally, is floor area ratio, which is the more typical urban central business district limitation that we're accustomed to seeing. Your floor area ratio in the city of Kirkwood is 2.5. For folks that are not familiar with this particular term, floor area ratio is the ratio of the built square footage to the square footage of the site. We are proposing 1.56, or approximately 40% below what's allowable. Said another way, we are proposing a building that is 40% smaller, roughly 100,000 square feet, than what is permitted under your current zoning code. If you ignore the number of units, we could build an additional 100,000 square feet. As you can see, this seems at odds with your current multifamily per unit dwelling lot per acre. I think the question here today, as it relates to this particular metric, is does the city want for rent luxury multifamily residential apartments in the downtown area? That's not for me to answer. That's not for any consultant to answer. That's for this council to answer. But it should be known that if we simply reduced our unit count, we could increase this building by 100,000 square feet, and it would comply with the B2 zoning code floor area ratio. I might mention that at 2,400 square feet, these apartments that we are proposing, if we did 93 as permitted under the current limitation, would be substantially out of compliance with what our typical income demographic could afford. And quite frankly, I think it directly flies in the face of the desire of the city of Kirkwood to add optionality in their housing in the downtown area. These would be extremely expensive apartments, despite the fact that they would comply with the floor area ratio. I might also mention the benefits of multifamily as it relates to school districts. Based on a traditional assessor analytic, our project for the Kirkwood School District only would produce $250,000 of annual contribution via real estate taxes. To try to equate that to benefit versus taxation of the use of the school district, we've looked at the National Multifamily Housing Conference, which is the gold standard when it comes to understanding the statistics that evolve around multifamily. And essentially they use US Census Bureau data that's easily accessible to anyone who may want to dig in further. Based on their analytics, the typical apartment complex has 16 school-age children per 100 apartment households for those projects built after 2010. In urban areas, that's actually a smaller number. However, we did not use that smaller number in this particular analysis. So applying that ratio to our 152 proposed units, we would have on average 24 school-age children that would be going to the Kirkwood School District, or at least would be eligible to go to the Kirkwood School District, whether they did or not. Based on the analytics on the tax, this equates to $10,000 of benefit to the Kirkwood School District per school-age child. I think that value proposition is probably substantially higher than the average residential house within the city of Kirkwood. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to one of our team members, Brian Rensing from CBB, who was the lead engineer on our traffic studies. I think he will give us an overview of the process, both on our original submittal as well as our revised submittal. And he's also going to dig into some information that provides some context for the traffic counts that we feel may be beneficial to this council, as whether or not we are approved by this council, there are going to be alternative uses proposed, and they should be, our proposal should be considered within that context. Jonathan, if you could turn it over to Brian as the presenter.
Good evening. My name is Brian Rensing. I'm a traffic engineer with CBB Transportation Engineers and Planners here in St. Louis. As Josh mentioned, I was the lead traffic engineer on the project. We originally completed a traffic impact study back in 2019 for their original submittal. Since that time, they've provided some updates to that plan. So we also updated our traffic impact study here in October of 2020. As part of that, they reduced some of the residential units for the development, as well as refined some of the ground floor uses. With those changes, there was a 45% reduction in trips based on those modifications. CBB assigned those traffic volumes to adjacent roads and evaluated the existing operating conditions without the development, as well as the forecasted condition with the development. After all of our analysis, basically the traffic impact study concludes that there's minimal impacts on the adjacent intersections and that there are no improvements warranted based on this proposed development. Next slide. In addition, it's important to note that the developer has incorporated some traffic improvements to their development plan. One of their major components here is that they're going to limit their access to Kirkwood Road to a right-in, right-out. This eliminates the need to try to turn left into the site from Kirkwood Road and try to battle traffic, either entering or exiting, turning left. So those vehicles would now shift down to the signalized intersection of Kirkwood Road and Washington Avenue, which is a much safer and easier movement to make. In addition, as was mentioned, they got a 3/4 access driveway to Washington Avenue. So this access point would prohibit the left turn out of the development to go towards Taylor Avenue. In addition, as he mentioned, they're going to do some bump outs at Taylor and Washington, which help to provide some additional space for the pedestrians to be seen by vehicles, as well as slow some vehicles down along Washington Avenue. And finally, they're going to do a hawk signal for pedestrians to easily cross Kirkwood Road. As you know, Kirkwood Road is a relatively busy road, and getting pedestrians to cross there safely is the goal of the hawk signal. Next slide. Finally, Altus asked us to compare how this development compares to other permitted uses that could also go on the site. So we looked at the daily trip generation for the proposed Kirkwood Flats site, as well as several other different permitted uses. As you can see here, their traffic range is kind of on the lower end, the middle end of a lot of other uses that could be positioned to apply for application here on the site. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Josh and be available for questions at the end.
Thanks, Brian. I also thought it might be helpful for the mayor and city council to hear from our partners at UMB Bank. I'll let them speak to the process that they undertook. I think you'll find, though, that they have been good stewards for the city of Kirkwood. I may also mention that the only reason our current modification to 152 units was possible was their willingness to reduce the land value price in an effort to provide a project that would be more acceptable to the Kirkwood community. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Travis Lavender.
Thank you, Josh. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Josh. Thank you to the City Council and Mayor Griffin for your time tonight and allowing us to speak. I asked Josh if we could have a little bit of time tonight to speak as well. And as Josh mentioned, we just really wanted to emphasize that there was a thorough process in getting to this point, and a lot of thought went into selecting Altus. And just to reemphasize our level of investment in the city of Kirkwood. And so my role with the bank as the vice president of properties, one of the things that I do is I sort of lead the charge on buying, selling, and leasing property for the bank. And so I was part of an overall initiative that started in 2017 to look at some of our key properties that were a bit dated, and this building was built in 1970, and you know, as Josh mentioned, was designed for a different era of banking. And so this was one of the key properties that came up first, was to say, you know, is this positioned for the future for the city of Kirkwood? And the resounding answer was no, right? I think everybody that's involved in the bank, as from a customer perspective, or our associates or anybody else, knows that it's just not an efficient use of the building and the property. I think it goes over 25,000 square feet, and we build new branches at 2,500 square feet. So first thing we did was look internally, right? What can we do to position the property better? Can we remodel it or renovate it and bring in some other tenants? For different architectural and financial reasons, that just wasn't feasible. And so the next part of the plan was to look to some of our trusted developers that we know through our banking relationships. And so we went out for requests for proposal to 10 developers. And we really left it as a blank slate and said, you know, here's the property. We will tell you that, you know, we want to stay in this property as a long-term tenant, and that our main objective is to activate the site. So the overall goal of the entire initiative is to activate our real estate, position it for future investment in the property. And so it was really a blank slate to these developers. And we received those proposals back. We had them come and do in-person presentations to our executive committee, including our CEO and chairman, Mariner Kemper. And those included thorough Q&A sessions, which sometimes were very lengthy and thorough. And to his credit, our CEO and chairman was very, very thoroughly involved. And he'll tell you that real estate is personal to him. His father was a CEO and chairman before him, so he has a personal story about every property, and this is no exception. So it was a very thorough process to select, but the reason why we selected Altus was because their project was far and away superior in how they activated the site, and it was a site that everyone was excited to be a part of for an extended time frame into the future. I think it may have been mentioned, but it was not by far was not the most lucrative offer. And since then, through the design revisions, we have taken a significant reduction in the price. So, you know, I feel like we have really walked the walk when it came to those priorities. We feel that this is really the best use of the property, and that's why we selected the project. Josh was very, very informed on what the master plan was for Kirkwood, and when we asked some of the developers, you could tell they didn't know it. Josh knew it front and back, so we felt confident that it fit into what the community wanted, and obviously better positioned us to serve our client base in the community of Kirkwood. And so through this process, right, I talked about it started in 2017, but we've been engaged with Altus since May of 2018, so over 2 years at this point. And through the entire process, UMB has been very involved. We assure you that this is not, by no means did we just throw this out to market and take the best offer that came back. There's been a lot of thought given to, and our CEO and chairman has given us cover to say, this is about positioning it for the future to better serve the community of Kirkwood. And we want to put the best product out there and be a part of a project that's exciting and revitalizes the property. So that was sort of a corporate perspective. I would also like to pass it over to Peter Blumeyer. He is our president, the UMB president of Greater St. Louis area, to talk a little bit about the relationship of UMB and the city of Kirkwood.
Thank you, Travis. And thank you to the City Council for time to speak with you on this project. And as all of you know, UMB has a long history with the City of Kirkwood. And obviously it's one that is extremely important to us, to our chairman and CEO, almost every associate in St. Louis, our shareholders, et cetera. And so with that, as Travis mentioned, we spent a very long time beginning in 2017 looking at our branches. And we wanted to know where we could do better. Where could we reinvest, if you will, into the community with the assets that we had? And probably the brightest, shiniest one for us was our asset in the city of Kirkwood. Not only because, one, as Travis mentioned, our branch has become outdated for us there. As you know, it stands at 26,000 square feet, where optimally we would utilize 10% of that, or 2,600 square feet with that. So to put it into mind, if you will, right, if you owned a 26,000 square foot home and you only needed 2,600 square feet, you'd probably ask your question, what am I doing with the other 90%? And I only bring up the house because actually my family and I are moving to the city of Kirkwood on November 5th. So we're extremely excited to join all of you as residents of Kirkwood. But with that, as we saw it, it was a branch that, an asset for us of which could be much better utilized. And it also could be much better utilized for the betterment of the community that was in it. And because of our long relationship with Kirkwood, we went through a very rigorous process, but never really leaving or giving any doubt to, we wanted to stay in Kirkwood. We wanted to do what was right for Kirkwood. We wanted to do what UMB could to help Kirkwood. And as we went through all of these projects, it became apparent to us that the project that is being proposed to the city council, in our opinion, would be the right project for the city of Kirkwood and the right project for UMB. I can assure you, as Travis mentioned, our CEO, Mariner Kemper, has been extremely involved in this process. He has a near and dear place in his heart for the city of St. Louis, as he graduated from Principia High School here in town. And so he's very familiar with the area and believes that this project could have a significant impact to the area. And it's one where UMB could be extremely helpful with that. So with that, I just would like to thank you for your time. Obviously, our relationship with the city of Kirkwood is extremely important to our organization. We would not have gone through the process that we did if it was not. We would not have taken deals that we could have taken deals that provided more capital to us, right? Maybe it would have been in the best interest of the shareholders and whatnot to take the highest price, but we also understand the need to be good corporate citizens and to respect what our communities need that we have the privilege of serving in. And so with that, we believe that this is that project that can bring it. And our commitment to the city of Kirkwood is as strong as it is when it was 40 years ago, when we purchased the building and Pete Genovese was running St. Louis. Our commitment to Kirkwood continues to stand today. And it will stand into the future under my leadership and the ones that come after me. So with that, I do want to thank you for all of your time. We're happy to answer any questions if need be. And with that, I will turn it back over to Josh.
Thanks, Peter. Travis as well. We've obviously covered a lot of ground here this evening. I think it's probably appropriate at this point to go ahead and put a conclusion on our presentation. I think there's a handful of points that are worthy of touching on again one more time prior to turning it back over to the mayor and city council. Restating what has been said in multiple ways this evening is we think it's quite evident that our proposal does comply with the downtown master plan that was commissioned by the city of Kirkwood, not by the residents of Taylor, not by the employees of Altus Properties, but by the city council on behalf of 25,000 Kirkwood residents, not just the folks that happen to live directly adjacent to our proposed site. Many, many people want to live in and around downtown Kirkwood for all the reasons that are so obvious and that we've touched on this evening. I might also mention that in January of this year, at the request of the city, DPZ partner Marina Corey did come back and represent her downtown master plan study. For those of us that were fortunate enough to be there, she did mention on multiple occasions that in her particular opinion, an expert opinion I might add, this was a success of the master plan should it get approved. Second, our project architect, HOK. Certainly my taste can be questioned. Certainly all of our taste can be questioned. However, HOK is internationally recognized. It is one of the largest architecture firms in the world. It has had a dramatic impact on the landscape of St. Louis in so many meaningful ways. That is without question. We hired them because we believed they could design a building that was worthy of the site. And we feel that they have brought their their best capabilities to the challenge. Working with staff was clearly important to us. We took their recommendations and requests seriously. We incorporated them into our proposed project. It's also worth mentioning, I think, that we have endeavored to satisfy those concerns of the neighborhood that does exist directly around us. We have reduced our height. We have reduced our unit count. Again, there will be folks that speak tonight that don't think it's enough. However, there are realities to this particular use. Size, as it relates to the building size, let's not conflate two issues this evening. This building is 40% smaller than what is permitted under your maximum FAR for the city of Kirkwood. Yes, it does have more front doors within its four walls than what's currently permitted. However, it is not bigger by any stretch than what is permitted. It has a meaningful financial impact to this community. I specifically mentioned the school district because I know this has been a topic of great debate over the last several months, specifically referencing a bond issuance that did not pass earlier this year. Without any effort, without any raised taxes, this project will create $250,000 annually that will directly benefit the city of Kirkwood School District. Traffic generation. We clearly understand our project creates traffic. However, comparing our traffic generation to zero is an inappropriate comparison. Clearly, the city would like to see this site developed. You could put a grocery store here and it would substantially increase traffic counts over what we're proposing, and a much smaller building with little to no financial benefit. Finally, section 220.2 of the Kirkwood zoning code. I won't restate what it says. I think Jonathan did a very fine job of that prior to my presentation. I think what this boils down to is, does the city of Kirkwood truly want a mixed use, multifamily, for rent, market rate apartment project in the city of Kirkwood? If they don't, that is their decision. We certainly will move on. We certainly will respect the wishes of this council. And my guess is most of the other developers in St. Louis will as well. We don't think that is necessarily what the city wants, however, based on the documents that have been commissioned and published by this council. Yes, there is a need to accommodate some modifications. This is a significant project that represents a significant investment within the city of Kirkwood. I cannot think of any meaningful project that didn't need to work hand in glove with the community it went into to accommodate the uniquenesses of a project of scale. Certainly, if you proposed a small 10 to 15,000 foot retail building, perhaps it would comply with all of the zoning codes, and there would be a nice big parking lot adjacent to it. We don't think that's what the city of Kirkwood wants, and we think we brought a project that, when considered on its merits, warrants the requested modifications. With that, I will conclude my presentation, and myself, as well as all of my partners that spoke tonight, will be available for questions.
Great, thank you very much. We will now go to questions and comments from the council, and like everyone else, I ask council to be concise and as brief as possible so that we can get the information we need, but also allow others to speak as well. So tonight we're going to start with Councilmember Sears. Any questions or comments?
I have, this is a very important consideration, very important proposal, strongly presented. I don't want the fact that I don't have questions at this time to mean that I won't have questions when this comes up for the first reading. And I don't want anybody to read anything into the fact that I don't have questions. I've studied it. I've listened to you. I'm going to continue to listen to the presentation and the rest of the hearing, but I do not have questions right now.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Councilmember Gibbons.
I did have just a couple of questions. I know that the public plaza is 80 feet long. What's the width of that? And what's the square footage?
I do not have the exact width available to me at the moment, but I would estimate that it is somewhere in the 45 to 55 foot depth, based on the overall building depth being approximately 75 feet.
Okay. And then I just wanted to make sure, because looking at some of the renderings, it looks like parking is showing on the Alpine parking lot. And I'm concerned about the retail on that corner, and that the public park, or that the parking that you're providing isn't as close, and that people will be parking in Alpine shop. Do you have an agreement with them of any kind, or?
We have parked the facility to comply with Kirkwood zoning code. Our count does not include any of the parking that is on the Alpine shop parcel. That being said, we have been in early and frequent communication with both the owner of the parcel as well as the operators of Alpine shop. I personally am a frequent visitor to Alpine shop, and we feel that bringing this density will substantially benefit their operation by bringing more bodies to the site. And we've proactively reached out to them to assure that we're good neighbors in the event something like that did occur, in terms of folks parking there and visiting both. And I would imagine the inverse would happen as frequently. If you went to a restaurant, there would be a good chance you may stop by Alpine shop either before or after that visit.
What is the height in the retail area? I know Marina said that 14 feet should be the standard.
I believe currently we are around 12 feet to the bottom of the structure. That was done to accommodate the 60-foot height request. We originally proposed 14. However, that was ultimately determined by the city as to, or we received feedback from the community. They didn't like the height of the building, so we reduced it to accommodate the 60-foot maximum.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's all the questions that I have right now.
Councilmember Ward.
Yeah, let me go to Jonathan real quick on a couple of things. Referencing that retail ceiling height, Jonathan, what is typically a successful ceiling height for retail?
Well, I mean, based on, I think, DPZ's expert opinion, I think they're always going to be obviously taller than, I think 12 to 14 feet is the range that they always discussed. Councilmember Gibbons is correct. I think they did reference 14 foot as the ideal. Honestly, that is why staff and the consultant recommended increasing our height requirement in our downtown district, partly for that reason. Since that was not acted upon as recommended by the consultant and by staff, this is a real result of that. So they, as the applicant mentioned, they reduced it to 12 feet, which is still a healthy height for commercial frontage in this location.
Is the entire first floor uniform at 12 feet?
I'll defer to Josh on that. Yeah,
I can answer that. Yes, it is, with the exception of the area that's beneath the pool on the amenity deck in the center of the building. That does drop down a bit lower. However, what we've done is accommodate parking underneath that space. It's behind the retail space.
Okay, and Jonathan, when we talk about the visual perception of the height of that building, do you know, and this might be an unfair question for you, if you don't have it, you can get back to us with it. The heights of the several buildings that are to the east of this proposal, along Adams and between Adams and Washington, those buildings may be structurally, in terms of floor height, lower, but their elevation pushes them up. So can you give us some kind of comparison?
Yeah, the applicant did, that was one of the height exhibits that the the Planning and Zoning Commission subcommittee requested, and it may take me, I might have to follow up with you on it, but it was provided and it did show those elevations in a straight line up kind of street view and comparing the proposed. I don't want to try to cite those from memory. So if I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I understand I'm being unfair here. Josh, let me, I'd like to kind of pick your brain a little bit in terms of your corporate understanding of the city of Kirkwood. Well, you know, if you take your time, walk us through the steps you take to get to understand and know this community, and then a test of your courage. And give us the strengths and the weaknesses that you view that the city of Kirkwood has.
That is quite the question, Council Member Ward. But in terms of our corporate understanding, I don't think any resident of St. Louis is not familiar with Kirkwood as a community. I have a great number of friends and professional colleagues that reside in Kirkwood, as I mentioned. As it relates to the process for a corporate approval, this is the first time we've gone through that within the city of Kirkwood. Certainly there has been a reputation in the past that the municipality can be challenging in terms of getting an approval for a proposed project. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn by saying that. I will tell you, when the city started publishing the various master planning documents from Envision 2035 to the downtown master plan and ultimately the PGAV downtown retail study, I think my community, the real estate development community, interpreted those documents as an opportunity. We saw those as very respected professional firms providing a framework for growth. That is what they are providing a framework for, is growth. We were encouraged by those. When the opportunity came along with UMB, it happened to be at the same time as those documents were published. And we thought, quite frankly, what an amazing opportunity. We were thrilled to win the RFP process. I think prior to those documents being published, we would have been more hesitant to engage in the process because we've known some of the historical challenges. I think like many things in life, the challenges of the community are also their benefits to a certain extent. I don't think it's any secret to say that Kirkwood residents are quite proud of being Kirkwood residents. I might say more than any other community within the St. Louis area. We knew we were going to have a community that got vocal about the project. I will say that we did not anticipate the level of vocal that occurred, and perhaps that's a miscalculation on our end. We are hoping that this council feels that the benefit to the entire community of Kirkwood, the 25,000 residents of Kirkwood, outweighs some of the concerns of folks who live directly adjacent to our property. We don't get to vote, so we don't know how that will happen. However, I'm an eternal optimist, so I sit here tonight optimistic that we will be successful. So I'll answer with my typical optimistic response that I hope the city of Kirkwood believes that we're trying to build a project that will be a benefit to the community, and ultimately this council will see fit to approve it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're going to take a pass on the weaknesses.
Well, I think weaknesses is a strong word. I think if there is a weakness, it right now is as the downtown, I can't remember if it was the Envision 2035 master plan or the downtown master plan. It did reference a population that has trended older than the St. Louis community as a whole. I think that financially Kirkwood has been increasing in value due to some of its benefits, and that has pushed out some folks that cannot currently afford a housing option there. And I think a project like this, a multifamily residential project in many communities like Kirkwood, is perceived as a negative. There is a historical perspective on apartments that they are somehow in some way a detriment to a community. I think that's wrong at its core, and I think it's more wrong today because many younger population sets as well as empty nester population sets have chosen to rent their home versus own their home. And I think Kirkwood is on the precipice of deciding whether or not this particular product type is a benefit to their community or not. And if they were to choose no, I think that would be a dramatic miscalculation and would jeopardize the ability to attract young families and professionals that might otherwise choose another community.
Okay. Thank you. If we could now turn to your corporate experience, I did somewhat of a cursory review of your properties, and I didn't see anything at or below this scale in your portfolio. Do you have any experience with projects of this size?
Sorry, could you restate the question, Mr. Ward?
When I reviewed your portfolio, I didn't see any properties that were developments on this size. They all tended to be much larger than this project. Would this be your first at this scale?
We actually have two projects that are smaller than this particular proposal. Grand Flats is 124 units, and Artera in Kansas City is 126 units. We were able to reduce the unit count on those particular projects because the municipalities with which they reside in granted 10 years of tax abatement. So that allowed us to bring the financial model into alignment despite the historical context of not being able to build a project that small.
Okay. And one final question, this may have to go to Jonathan. The traffic intersection there at eastbound on Washington at Kirkwood Road, is there room to extend the stacking lane there for left turn traffic?
The eastbound traffic on Washington?
I'm sorry, westbound.
Westbound traffic.
Yeah. So if we're gonna push, right turn only out of there, that means that,
Yeah, I would have to, honestly, I'd have to look to see what the width is there. I think the curb to curb is pretty standard, but I would have to look at that to see if restriping could occur. It likely would affect, I think from memory, what it would affect is on-street parking. So there's not on-street parking as you get closer to the intersection. So if that were to extend further eastward, it would mean taking up on-street parking to do so. But if that was a decision, if that was a recommendation, we can look into that. I mean, I will state the level of service analysis was done at the intersection, at the signalized intersection for the anticipated trips, and it did not indicate that that level of improvements were needed. However, we can certainly look further into that.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Dewey. You're still muted, Maggie. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Also, the cat has a mouse in the house, so if I leap, that's why I'm leaping. So I apologize. I have concerns about the eastern side of the project. There's, as you said, little or no landscaping, and I'm wondering what are all of the reasons for none? There are just 2 trees at both sides.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll let Josh answer as well. I mean, initial reaction that I have is, I think they focused, as you can see on the plan, they focused the landscaping toward the street frontage, and with it needing to accommodate things like fire access. Obviously, the size of their development dictates that, right? And then the parking requirements that we have, that's where you end up. I think Josh also mentioned some of the structural with the retaining wall adjacent, the utility lines there that provide challenges to landscaping in that area. That is the extent of the parking lot existing today as well. And I think those are my observations. I don't know if Josh has anything to add to that.
The only thing I might add, Jonathan, clearly those are impacts. We also have a complicated geometry. We do have a portion of our parcel that exists behind the service station directly to our west. As such, there are drive lanes that need to get back around that to allow for full access of the site. and there are minimum geometries that are required within a residential building. Residential buildings are almost always built within a very similar width, generally speaking, 65 to 80 feet. The reason that is because you have roughly 30 to 35 feet of residential unit space, a 5 to 7 foot wide hallway, and again, another 30 to 35 feet of space on the other side of that hallway. That is pretty much the recommended depth of a unit from a design perspective. Otherwise, you can't get natural light back into the balance of the unit. So in order to have the eastern wing of the building be able to continue past what would be the northern boundary of the service station, our southern boundary, it has to fall within the middle of that space and then have drive lanes on either side of it. Again, though, I might mention that depending on our ultimate parking needs, we are more than happy to explore additional landscaping back and accommodate all of the stakeholders' requirements from the power lines to the residents clearly that exist within the project behind us, as well as the city council. It's probably worth noting directly on the other side of that fence, there is no landscaping either with our adjacent property of condominiums. My guess is that's because of the retaining wall and the power lines as well. Those are some extenuating factors. But again, we are more than happy to explore ways to add additional landscaping back there and still accommodate the fire department, power lines, as well as forestry.
Okay. And the second question is, you mentioned a fitness facility. How extensive will that be?
That's a great question. So we typically construct those roughly around 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. On average, we will have, depending on the size of the development, 5 to 8 cardio equipment machines, 2 to 3 assisted weight machines. We don't typically provide unassisted barbells within our residential because they're not manned by staff, and we wouldn't want someone to drop a barbell and hurt themselves. And then we will also embrace some of the newer technologies that exist, whether that's Peloton, whether that's a mirror system, but and other on-demand type utilizations. Oftentimes, we also bring in trainers certain times of the week. Again, in this particular location, we are contemplating a full simulator facility. That would not only be a golf simulator, which most of us are accustomed to or knowledgeable about, but they also have many other sports now that are included in those technology packages.
Okay. Did you consider any sort of agreement or discussion with the YMCA, which is very close?
We often try to partner with local fitness facilities and provide discounts. We actually do that well beyond fitness facilities. We will often partner with restaurants to provide resident discounts, and then in turn, they can have events at the facility. Same for fitness. We often do it for spa, salons, things of that nature. At the end of the day, if we can provide a more convenient lifestyle for the residents within the facility, we perceive that as a win-win all around.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Zimmer, any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just so everybody, doesn't read into this, as Councilmember Sears said, tonight we're just asking questions and gathering information. My first question is, I didn't see anywhere, what size units will this proposal include? Are they 1 bedroom? Are they 2 bedroom? Average square foot, maximum minimum square foot per unit?
Sure. First of all, Councilman Zimmer, on page 23 of our application document, we specifically detail all of the unit breakdown and average sizes in case you want to review that later.
Yeah, I saw that.
For tonight's conversation, our minimum unit size is approximately 500 square feet. That is a studio. And our maximum unit size is approximately 1,400 square feet. The vast majority of our units are either 1 bedrooms or 1 bedrooms plus a den. We have found those to be most successful in the St. Louis marketplace, as typically a resident that is moving into the facility is making a decision based on what we refer to in our particular industry as lump sum pricing. They want to understand what their total pricing is. And for the most part, on average, we typically only have 1 resident per unit. So we see more success on the 1 bedrooms or smaller. That being said, in this particular market, we do think there's a need for 2 beds and 3-bed units. So we do have a few of those included. Right now, we're contemplating only 4 3-bedroom units, with the balance of the units being smaller than that.
Okay. And I did see that on the proposal, but I figured our audience would probably
Fair
know
enough.
that.
Yes, sir.
I think a lot of my questions have been answered. You've provided a lot of information for us to digest and review. I do appreciate the public walkway on the north side of the property. And that's all the questions I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Zimmer. I will wrap up with Councilmember Wertz.
Oh man, pressure's on. So I have 2 questions I want to ask, and the first goes to kind of the traffic study and that comparison to table basically that you showed. Basically what it's telling us is if someone wanted to come in and build a building, kind of the same specs and everything, and use it as an office space, it would actually produce more traffic and congestion by like 50%. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then this one is probably more for Jonathan. So kind of sticking with this whole office space idea, if someone were to come in and ask to build an office space in that spot, let's say same spec, same everything, would they have the same density calculation, or that's only because this is a residential, correct?
That's correct. The only regulation they would have is the 2.5 FAR.
Perfect. And so in that case, they would need a modification, whatever. But then again, that means we wouldn't be getting the public plaza, the mid-cross walking, the off-site improvements. Those are kind of things that come with this modification request, correct?
That's accurate. Yes.
Okay. All right. That's it. Thank you guys so much.
Great. Thank you. All right. With that, we will now open it up to comments from our residents who are on Zoom. Again, I ask everyone to be brief and concise. We've all received the emails, dozens of emails, and I will speak for myself and the council. Every email, I read every email, and I know the whole council does, and we will continue to on this matter until it's resolved. So again, I ask everyone to be brief, concise, and please do not repeat what others have said. We do hear everyone. So do we have
Mayor, may I also state, anyone wishing to make a comment, if you would please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
All right. Do we have anyone wishing to speak this evening?
Chuck Levy.
Can you see me?
Please go ahead, sir.
I have no audio.
We can hear you.
Oh, there was no mention of the rents. Could they discuss the different rents for the different size apartments, please?
Yes, that was just mentioned. That was just mentioned to be 1 and 2 bedroom apartments.
The rents.
Is Josh still on? Could you please tell us what the rents are going to be? And then from here, there'll be comments from citizens, and please email us with any questions specific questions you might have.
You're muted.
Josh, you are on mute.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. Yes, to directly answer your question, in general, our rents will range from about $1,200 to $2,000 a month, with about 75% of the units being below that ratio. There will be some top floor units, 3 bedrooms, larger units that do go up a bit higher to $2,500 to $3,000. But the vast majority of the rents will be between $1,200 and $2,000 per month.
Thank you.
All right. again, we'll ask people do, if you have specific questions, feel free to email those to us and we will get you answers on those. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak?
Parker Pence.
Hi, everyone. My name is Parker Pence. I live at 3 Windsor Lane, Kirkwood, Missouri. I just wanted to, I'm sure you guys probably know that I'm in support of the project. I think it's a good, great project for a whole host of reasons. But just to zoom out real quick, I just wanted to state that I think this project is more than just this single project. It's really a question of what Kirkwood wants to be and for whom it wants to be. A couple of weeks ago, the council stated that it was their opinion that they wanted active citizens in their downtown. And this is really our opportunity to do that and to make Kirkwood a place for more than just, people that can spend $700,000 on a home, predominantly white people. It's a place for everyone, and Kirkwood is its strongest when it's that place. And I think this is our opportunity to do it. And I think that this is really a question of equality. And so I know that's a lot of stakes. It's a big weight to carry, but I think you guys are capable of it. And I really appreciate your guys putting in the hours on this one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Andy Struckoff.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Andy Struckoff. I live at 931 Curran Avenue. I'm in favor of the project. I view it as a continuance of the evolution of downtown Kirkwood. I remember back when, there was a, big Target store in downtown Kirkwood, and Kirkwood felt much more highway oriented, much more vehicle oriented. And, with the development of Kirkwood Station Apartments and the condos and the townhomes around there, and now we have the performance venue going in right near there. It's really kind of changed the character of that end, downtown Kirkwood. And I think this development kind of continues that evolution to the north end of downtown Kirkwood. I also really like the price points. There's a dearth of homes available in Kirkwood anymore at the price point between $250,000, $350,000, or, which mortgages between $1,200 and $2,000 a month. It'd be great to give younger professionals entry into Kirkwood and also give an opportunity for empty nesters to stay in Kirkwood, to maintain their quality of life. So thanks for your time this evening.
I didn't get Mr. Struckoff's address. What?
931 Curran Avenue.
Thank you.
Mark Venturella.
Hi guys, my name is Mark Venturella. I live at 718 Craig Drive. Full disclosure, I do work for Office Properties. My family moved into Kirkwood in March. We sought long and hard to find a home in Kirkwood. It took us over a year living at the in-laws, you name it. We really went after Kirkwood to live because of these downtown amenities. This project is additive to that. I think the presentation of the project speaks for itself. I just am really excited about the opportunity to participate in the project as a team member, should the city council vote that way.
Sorry, Mayor, may I say, Mark, can you restate your address? You kind of cut out during that moment.
Yes, ma'am. It's 718 Craig Drive.
Thank you.
If anyone else wishing to speak?
Dan Herron.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay.
Dan.
Hi there, Tim, Mayor. And thank you, Mayor and council members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I think the downtown master plan provides an excellent roadmap for the development of downtown Kirkwood. The master plan sets out goals, but it doesn't really dictate exactly how those goals have to be achieved. Instead, the master plan illustrates a variety of options that can be taken. And one of the goals of the master plan is to increase density in the downtown area, and I'm very much in favor of that. I agree that the however, with Jonathan, that the master plan does not preclude larger multifamily developments. I find it telling, however, that the annotations in the master plan for downtown north, downtown central, and downtown south make 7 references to the missing middle, and we all at this point know what that is. And it makes no references whatsoever to the larger multifamily units. Now, I wasn't involved in that process, but it makes sense to me that that is because a focus on larger multifamily units or a development of too many of them would create way too many traffic congestion and safety issues. I do believe a mix of missing middle and larger multifamily units would be good for Kirkwood. But those multifamily developments need to meet code, or at least be reasonable relative to code when modifications are considered. Code provides the rules that must be followed along the master plan roadmap. Along with other modifications being requested, the Altus proposal calls for 152 apartment units, while code allows 93. That's well over 1.5 times what code allows. Actually, it's 1.63 times what code allows. Approving Altus's proposal would require a blatant disregard of our code and set a very bad precedent, in my opinion. For many reasons, I believe the Altus development would be bad for Kirkwood. As you can tell from the over 900 citizens signing the petition, many others feel the same. I ask the City Council to stay true to our city's adopted code and reject this proposal. Thank you for allowing my input. And by the way, I'm at Dan Heron at 130 East Bodley. I apologize for not stating that sooner.
Dan?
Richard Randall.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Rick, you're muted. There you go.
Rick Randall, 200 North Taylor. I appreciate the time to speak about this project tonight. My wife and I moved to 200 North Taylor in 2016, and I can say that when I came here, I was very concerned about traffic, noise, and privacy and the like. I did have fears. My wife made me do it. It took about 24 hours to realize those fears were all wrong, that it's a tremendous place to live near downtown Kirkwood and reach of so many amenities on foot. I'm very much a supporter of this project. I believe that density, well planned, well thought out, well executed, which I think the Altus plan will do, is only going to enhance downtown Kirkwood and make it more energetic, more viable, more sustainable. And I also believe that diversity is a big part of Kirkwood, where we need to continue to consider how we can get our community somewhat more diverse. I believe this would do it. It's been mentioned before, empty nesters and young professionals. And I just think it'll make for a more diverse community. So I very much support it. One final point is, I think that all our inner suburbs, Kirkwood being one of them, has some responsibility to try and curb urban sprawl, which is so much of an issue today with the ecology, with the greenhouse gases and so forth, and cars. And I think bringing people back into the inner suburbs where they can get on their feet, get on their bikes, walk to all these amenities is a big way to go. So I'm very much in favor of it. Look forward to having this project very near my house, within a block of my house. So I appreciate your time and all your consideration of this project. I know it's difficult, and I look forward to seeing it happen.
Thank you, Rick.
Marilyn Marcus.
Thank you. I just want to concur with the previous speaker who was concerned about 59 units over code, whereas it should be no more than 93 units. I'm very concerned about the density. If you look at Kirkwood Station Plaza apartments, which were developed in a commercial area. As someone said, that's where Target was, that's where the movie theater was, the post office. That was definitely a commercial area. It was developed with great vision. Kirkwood Station Plaza apartments across from City Hall were built on far more land. There are 159 apartments extending from Kirkwood Road all the way back to Taylor Avenue. And their third building is across the street, extending from Madison over to Monroe Avenue. So I talked to them the other day. They have an awful lot of one-bedroom apartments available. Two-bedroom apartments are waitlisted. If we want diversity, I'm not sure that $1,200 to $2,500 is going to bring in more diversity as rentals. The square footage is way too small. I assume that this is a business since Altus will retain ownership along with United Missouri Bank. Since this is a business, have they done a business plan so that they know that all 152 of these apartments will be rentable and not end up being an albatross for Kirkwood to have to deal with, or conveniently for UMB Bank to keep buying back and reselling for wonderful tax breaks? The master plan that was put out originally called for lower building heights. It calls for townhouses and linear buildings along Kirkwood Road. Regarding tax base, the Savoy Group's Barclay condominiums being built across from the police station, 14 deluxe condos still being built, only one is available. Have we even considered putting condominiums rather than apartments in this area? Perhaps 75 condominiums, which I think would sell like hotcakes, versus trying to rent out these apartments, which may not appeal to young singles and professionals who generally prefer to be out closer to Chesterfield and 141, Clayton, or on Highway 64. So that's all I have to say. I believe in smart progress, but not simply progress for progress's sake. I'm asking you to please reject this plan and come up with something that makes sense for our suburban community. Thank you.
Thank you.
John?
I would like to, not repeating anything, but the individuals that spoke against the project because of the complete disregard for the code, I agree with them completely. We've developed the master plan for a reason. We develop codes for a reason. Yet a developer comes in and says, we will ask for waivers. That is not good for Kirkwood. So I'm against this project.
Angie?
Good evening. My name is Angie McAlone, and I live at 445 North Taylor. I just wanted to make the point that over 900 people signed the petition against this project, and those people all don't live on Taylor, Bodley, or Washington streets. However, as a neighbor to the proposed property, I do have concerns about the eastern boundary and increased traffic, along with the other concerns that people had discussed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Jensen?
Hi, this is Sarah Jensen. I live at 208 East Bodley. I got two questions for you. What page of the original master plan is anything like this development on for reference? And my second question is, when did this development and the idea of this all start?
Sarah, this is not what, Jonathan, can you take Sarah's email address and get back to her with that information? Do you mind?
No, I can do that. If she'd rather not give it out.
No, I think this is something that everybody might want to hear. I think that's a question that I'm not the only one that probably wants an answer to that.
Well, we'll get that information. We'll get that information out, Sarah. This is the time for comments.
Well, okay, so my
comment.
comment then as well is I am completely against this project. And can you let me know when this project started in the development phase?
Yes, we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else wishing to speak?
There are no more hands. Just
right.
now there are several more hands.
Okay.
John, you should be unmuted.
So John, you may go ahead. John, are you with us? Oh, now you've muted yourself, John. Freddie, let's go on to next, and then we can come back to John.
Timothy?
All right.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. My name is Timothy Rybont, 111 East Washington, 1S. This is a condo will actually be my kitchen window, will be facing this project. And I understand the need to develop the properties in this area and kind of the overall plan for the downtown area. My main concern is similar to what we've heard, is regarding the density of the unit and really the translation of the density into traffic. In the parking study, it talks about traffic intersections, and it rates the traffic intersections from A through F. The intersection of Washington and Kirkwood Boulevard is rated as a D on this project, and that is just with this one project. If you look at other properties to be developed in this area, I really think the city needs to look at, if they are going to consider densities greater than the current master plan, really need to look at a comprehensive traffic study if we're going to actually exceed the density, because we're going to see traffic that probably is unanticipated based on what we've experienced. So I'm opposed to the project based on really the density of the project. Certainly other concerns on the eastern property lines. I'd love to see the landscaping there. And I'd also point out Washington on that street, there already is, when traffic goes by, cars pull over the side to allow for another car to pass. And that's a common practice on that street. And this will further aggravate that situation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have others, Freddie?
Laura?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Laura, we can. Oh, Laura went away. Okay. Do we have anyone else? There's Laura again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm at 484 North Taylor. And I would say, you know, as far as the traffic study and the right-hand turns, well, for the folks wanting to get in the development, traveling southbound on Kirkwood Road, to say that they're going to go all the way to the light at Washington to go left, to then turn left into their development, I think is probably not the case. They're more so going to turn left at Bodley and go right down Taylor. So putting more risk on the pedestrians and kids and families that live on Taylor. So you might be releasing some pressure for folks walking on Kirkwood, but you're just putting pressure for the folks on Taylor. And I would also ask the council to consider the number of folks writing, emailing, letters in opposition to this project compared to those in favor of. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom?
Tom, you're on. All right. Freddie, is there anyone else? We can come back to Tom and see if if he's able to speak.
We're back to John.
All right.
You hear me?
John, I think we hear somebody. Could you speak louder?
Is this better? Do I need to put this thing, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Is
We
this
can barely hear you, but we can hear you, John.
Let me try turning the volume's all the way up. I don't know what it is. Okay, I'll just send you some information. You can't hear this, I guess.
Right. Okay. Yeah, John, if you can email us, that would be great. The email information was on the Zoom invite. So if you could do that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, do we have anyone else wishing to speak, Freddie?
Doug?
Yes, Doug Schnell, 457 North Taylor. I just wanted to reiterate the concern around the traffic flow around the site and how that might impact Taylor with the southbound traffic exiting before on Essex or Bodley to go around the site onto Washington and impacting the traffic in the area. The other piece I just wanted to mention, I know the presenter used the FAR ratio. I believe that only impacts and defines the building height. Again, I may be wrong about that, but I believe that only impacts the building height. And in this case, the height is capped at 60 feet. That is something maybe perhaps to get more information on. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Doug. Any more hands, Freddie?
There's one more. Have I recognized Laura Greco?
Yes, Laura spoke already. Yeah.
She didn't lower her hand.
Yeah.
The last person is going to be Eric Sutton.
Hello, this is Jonathan Worth. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I live at 447 Clemens Avenue. I'm excited about living in a city that has and invests in a vision for a master plan for the future, and even more excited about a project that dovetails into that master plan. That's all.
Jonathan, could you give us your last name?
Worth.
I'm sorry?
Worth.
Worth. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, Eric?
Yes. Hi.
Yes,
this
please,
is
go ahead.
hi. Thanks. I appreciate you hearing my thoughts. I live at 300 North Taylor, directly across from the YMCA. Just wanted to share my concerns with the project. I saw a lot of attractive things this evening. Share a lot of the same concerns with some of the other citizens that have spoken up this evening. One of the main concerns, again, goes back to traffic. And I know you don't want to hear the repeat thoughts this evening, but, I think you have to hear it loud and clear that there's some real concerns with traffic. We can continually have challenges with traffic from Adams heading westbound, turning northbound on Taylor, to then turn west on Washington to avoid some of the traffic lights. Compound that with some of the foot traffic that comes and goes from the YMCA, not only to the south, but also to the north. There's a lot of street parking that happens because of the YMCA on Washington. I appreciate some of the efforts with the bump outs with the curbing. I think that's a great idea, but I think there has to be more done there, whether it be limiting street parking, which I think is going to directly affect some of the parking alternatives for the Y. But I think you have to look at I would like to see the details of that traffic study and maybe that's shared out publicly. But I think you have to take that traffic study out a little bit further and address some of the concerns with some of the neighboring blocks again. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Eric. We have anyone else, Freddie?
Matt.
Oh, there's Matt. Matt.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is Matt Weaver. I live at 239 East Adams Avenue. So I just want to add a couple of points. So first of all, I'm 100% in development, in support of redevelopment of downtown Kirkwood. I'm a longtime resident of near downtown. I'm just a block or so away. And that's one of the reasons that we chose to live in Kirkwood, is that it's a very walkable community. There's lots of amenities available. My concern with this particular development, and it's been mentioned before, it's the density, right? So 1,200 square feet is the current guideline. I think that, that might be a little bit big, and there's certainly some room for variance there. But this particular property, they're asking for 39% less than that. So a 40% variance of current code, I think, is a little bit extreme. Certainly, I think we as a community could entertain something smaller than the 1,200 square feet in our downtown core. But I would highly want to emphasize that precedent matters. If you approve this development, you open the door for other developers to ask for exactly the same thing, or perhaps even more. So thank you for taking the moment to listen to my comments, and thank you for your consideration of this project.
Thank you, Matt.
And that is all.
All right. Well, thank you all for your comments. Please feel free to email any questions and comments to the City Council via our City Clerk. Again, her email address is either on the website, it was on the invite that everyone received. So again, Council will we read every email we get. All right. So Bob.
I'm looking at the hands raised, and I keep seeing our Glenn coming up and down. I didn't want to leave out somebody.
Bob, I see that Freddie typed a message to him in the chat. I guess he's having trouble unmuting that gentleman, so he has given him my email address.
Okay, awesome.
Send a comment. I think he can't get him unmuted.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure everybody.
Oh, it's fine. No, yeah, it's not showing up on mine. So again, please feel free to email City Clerk, who will get all emails with questions and comments to the council. With that, are there any final council comments, questions? All right. With that, this public hearing is closed, and we will have the resolution up for a vote at our meeting, our next meeting, which is at 7 p.m. on Thursday, Thursday, November 5th. That's when the council will vote on this resolution. We wish everyone a good evening, and we are adjourned.